Guten Mittag. I wish I could speak in Dutch, but I must speak in English. Thank you so much, Art, for inviting me. Thank you for writing this beautiful book, Elviskinderen. Judith and Art, wholehearted congratulations. Your book will change lives. It will save lives. And thank you all for being here, and you who are listening at home in other countries on the screen, because you will be part of this movement, of this wave of consciousness to understand Elviskinderen, replacement children, as I have called it in my book, because we really, really can make a difference if we understand what the consequences are when a child is born after a death or is even a surviving child in a family. There can be serious long-term consequences. I have seen many replacement children in my practice near Geneva in Switzerland over the last 25 years. And I want to bring you just some of the citations that I have heard. I feel so lonely. There's a void, a great solitude. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I feel. I never cried. My mother cried because she lost a baby. I didn't want her to cry for me. Who am I? I feel fake. I feel like an imposter. Life? I can't do that. I'm a total loser. I failed in everything. When will I ever be good enough? I've never known a certain kind of happiness. I never had a real relationship with my parents or my partner or my children. I always felt guilty as if it was my fault that my brother died or my sister died. And you can imagine this if the sister saw how the brother was killed by an oncoming car crossing the street, coming home from the beach, or how it was when the brother was there and the sister drowned. You write in your book, rightfully, Elvis children feel an existential loneliness, and I think we can feel it here now. It's a huge absence if there was supposed to be a sibling, a human being, and then there wasn't. And it's about one's own right to exist. We have not been aware of the consequences of this. This has happened for centuries, for millennia, but we have not been aware enough. What are the consequences? If I look at the research, which started in the 1960s, they actually saw a replacement child first in a very narrow definition as one who was just conceived after. But it's a much, much broader definition that we need to understand all of them. And they saw them as one who was returning the dead one, the revenant. It's a French word, even in English. So when a human being is expected to replace or to be a revenant, somebody who comes back from the dead, who is a ghost basically, that individual is not meant to be him or herself, but to be another one. Actually, they are to be a dead person. So you can imagine that replacement children can suffer, and not just as children. This is a lifelong condition. They can suffer as adults, consciously or unconsciously. There is fear, there's loneliness. This is a well-known painting from Edvard Munch. He was a replacement child. They can feel guilt or shame weighed down, like in this sculpture by Caroline Mackenzie, who has a wonderful website about the art of grieving. I've known her now for 20 years, and you will see her transformation a little later on. There is the grief and the sadness overshadowing the life of an Elvis child. Vincent van Gogh was a famous replacement child, and you see this painting, sorrowing old man, 2 months before he died, called also At Eternity's Gate. I think that the main question for an Elvis child, a replacement child, is who am I? Am I me? Or am I someone else? This is a very deeply emotional, existential question, and often it's unconscious. Many of these don't know that they are actually replacing another absent child or other member of the family. It's a secret, it's a taboo. So the big challenge for the Elvis child is to find a way back to themselves, to their own life. I think this went too fast. Yes. This is what it's about. To get to a place where an Elvis child, a replacement child, can say, I am me, I'm alive, I exist, I have the right to exist. Now, don't be afraid. Some Elvis children that I have seen in my practice have received all kinds of diagnoses. Low self-esteem, low self-worth, anxiety and phobias, depression, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. Several cases also were thought to have suffered in sexual abuse. Some were told they had a borderline disorder, they had a narcissistic disorder, they had an antisocial disorder, they had a dependent personality disorder. In some cases, there might even be some psychotic symptoms. And in some cases, it's not only mental suffering or psychological suffering, it could be physical suffering. I know many replacement children who've had many accidents, who had risky behavior, who kind of put their life on the line to see whether they are coming out alive. It is not a pathology. This is an existential condition, and no matter what diagnosis might have been given, the underlying cause, very often giving rise to all kinds of symptoms misunderstood, is that they are born on a bed of death, or in a more lighter but still poignant way, it was death that rocked the cradle. So we are working hard to make this more conscious, and I've already met some of you in the audience who are aware of this, who are working with these people who come to consult you. And it is so important that you recognize what it is that they really suffer from. It's existential. And I call it an existential condition because a health condition can be there, but the health condition can improve. This is the beginning of a really, really big movement. I think we are on a wave. There are books here. I saw 3, 4, or 5 books being published now in Dutch, and I know of many people doing research. This is wonderful that we are here together working on this. I will now focus on 4 areas which I found were important to focus on in a replacement child that comes to the practice saying, I'm not well at ease in my life. So one of the first issues really is bonding, and thank you, Art, you actually said most of it. Maybe here a citation from John Bowlby, the pioneer of attachment research. Unfortunately, there is no lack of proof that the loss of a baby can give rise to serious problems later on for the parents, but also for surviving children. It seems to contradict what I just said in terms of serious consequences, but it doesn't. In my experience, when you recognize the root cause, this is when the healing can start. But to just give you an idea of how bonding can look like, don't be shocked. I want to raise consciousness, I don't want to shock. Is this painting by Austrian artist Egon Schiele, A Replacement Child? And you can see how the baby is sort of pinkish, full of life, and how the mother is painted in dark colors. She's grieving, she's depressed. And a famous French psychiatrist, André Green, himself a replacement child, developed a very important concept. He developed the concept of the dead mother. The dead mother isn't dead. She's just unavailable to the child, and the child may introject that image. And that's something that we can recognize. It's difficult maybe in practice, but we can recognize that, and we can unearth an alive image of the inner mother and maybe the outer mother as well. Identity. An image by Salvador Dali, illustrating Macbeth. Salvador Dali, A Replacement Child. This was brought to me by a replacement child into my practice. You see this amalgam, you see this being joined with a frightening other. And that needs to be recognized, and that needs to be differentiated out in order to find the person who can say, I'm me, I'm just me, I'm not me and the other who is not. He was a replacement child, Dali. He said, I swam in a hellish placenta. The effect was stolen from me already in the womb, because he is born 9 months and 10 days after the death of Salvador number 1. And it's an interesting observation. He always put 3 years between him and the other Salvador. It's not true. It was just 10 days after the death that he was conceived. And of course you can tell, right? When you see an image from Salvador Dali, you know that's a Dali. That's the unique, only himself, Salvador Dali. I think it was his creation, his art, that saved him. Guilt. No, grief, first grief. Vincent van Gogh. Existence overshadowed by grief. The young man on the left bears the traits of Vincent, and it says on the back of his chair, it's Vincent. So this is a bit of a self-portrait. And you can see that he's looking across to catch the eyes, the gaze of his mother. And she's not seeing him. She's just too downcast. She cannot see him. As you can see from the dates, he is the most researched case, actually, amongst the replacement children. He is born on the exact same day, 1 year later. And he passes daily by the grave which bears his first name. His father was a pastor and they lived in the parsonage. I believe his art saved him. The creative is the antidote to the destructive, to an experience of death too early in one's life, the impact of a death. I think his art saved him. I wish somebody could have recognized what he was really suffering from. Maybe then he wouldn't have had to die by suicide. And you may know that his beloved brother Theo had a son called Vincent again, the third one, and Theo had written to him, you know, Vincent van Gogh wasn't famous at the time, and his brother had written to him saying, maybe my son will be once famous. And Vincent van Gogh just always suffered from a lack of existential right and self-value. Of course, today we appreciate him so much, just for the beautiful work he has done. Guilt, the fourth area, no checklist, but I invariably find that some of these areas will pop up in a therapy or an analysis. Guilt. A replacement child may have what I call a Cain and Abel complex. You may remember from the Bible, Cain killed Abel, and then Cain wandered the earth and heard the voice, your brother's blood is crying out to me. Actually, a replacement child can have both. A Cain complex, feeling like it was responsible, it slayed the other one, or the Abel complex, the victim. And it can have really both together. It's also something that we need to find out when we work with them. Guilt. There are several layers of guilt. The most known one is survivor's guilt, not just in sibling death, but even in catastrophes, in war, etc. Why do I survive and not the other? So we can suffer from survivor's guilt. A replacement, an Elvis child, can also suffer from introjected guilt, being held responsible, consciously or unconsciously. It may itself hold itself responsible for the absence of the other, or this might be in a fantasy of a parent or grandparent. This is written about in the literature, in the research. This child is here, the other is not. It's this child's fault. There can be guilt because of narcissistic rage, if it is unfavorably compared with the absent child, if it feels never good enough. And then there can be existential guilt, missing out on living one's own life, one's own self-realization. What it really takes, as I work not with children but with adults, so my theory, my book is on adult replacement children, ARC. It takes awareness, it takes recognition, it takes compassion. Compassion with oneself, with one's parents, with one's siblings. So I'm for the arch of understanding here. And I would like to give you a few more personal words about myself. I am a replacement child. I'm born 6 months after the death of my brother from an undiagnosed appendicitis. That means my mother was pregnant with me 3 months. And he was buried in that plot, so that's me as a child. In a plot, my parents built the house in front of the cemetery to be close to him. This is a case of protracted frozen grief, okay? And he was given a gravestone, a tombstone, and on it was written in German, as you can maybe read, "Close to the heart, but far from the eye." Far from the eye. That was my brother. I was close to the eye of my mother, but I felt I was very far from her heart. It was a difficult relationship. I think she couldn't attach to me, I couldn't attach to her. Nobody's fault, but it was difficult. And you can tell, those who know drawings, I was 6, I made this Mother's Day card. I pity my mother today for receiving this card. This is terrible. Okay? But this is how it felt when I was 6. You know? There's a wall, there's a dividing line. We both have, I don't know whether you can recognize it, there's a small bird. A bird is a symbol of the soul. We both have it, but we can't really get together. Whoever is a Kleinian here, I was not breastfed, just to. And then I found this painting. I did when I was probably 10 years old. So there's a dragon guarding the entrance to the cave. And at the lower left corner, you see a suitcase. I've always liked traveling. And the suitcase is full of a treasure. Okay? And so I'm happy that there was at least a dragon guarding that treasure. Because if you slide over with your eyes to the right side, you see the tombstone, right? I didn't know what I was doing when I was 10, but my soul did. My unconscious expressed exactly what I needed to do. I needed to guard the silver and the gold of my self-value. The soul does not sit easy with replacing. The soul will make you suffer because the soul wants you to self-realize your potential to come into your own. So here comes the creative chance for discovering that you have an intrinsic true self. As a Jungian, I believe in the archetypal self, a force, a dynamic force which pushes the process of individuation forward. Look at this, you've seen this. Shame and Guilt, right? A bronze by Caroline. And then this. I have this at home. She did it with art. We've been talking for 20 years. It is beautiful. This is how a replacement child can take advantage of the creative chances to recognize it, become aware, recognize, have compassion, and step into your own life. Trust that your soul will want you to recognize you to exist. I just learned that soul in Dutch is ziel. Zeal in German is goal. So for me, I take home from this day, the soul is the goal. So I trained to be a Jungian. I think I was called in midlife to study this. Then I discovered that Jung was a replacement child. I didn't know that when I studied. I wrote my thesis on it. I've been teaching ever since. He was born after 3 dead children. So if Jung invented or recognized that force, the self pushing for individuation, I was in the right place to train. And he discovered it for himself, I think. So he said, the urge and compulsion to self-realization is a law of nature and of thus invincible power. So when there is individuation, there's no more replacement. You know, it denotes the process by which a person becomes a psychological individual, a separate, indivisible unity, no more that Macbeth thingy, right, with the amalgam that you just saw. It went too fast all by itself. It becomes a separate, indivisible unity or a whole. But it takes recognizing that shadow. It takes recognizing the suffering. So in my view, hope for a replacement child lies in the rediscovery of their own irreplaceable soul, their self. And this is where Art and Judith, we join in our approaches, even though we come from 2 different schools. When you say existential acknowledgement is the basis of strengthening Elvis Child's self-validation, I take it to be self-validation, self-realization, and ultimately a rebirth, a psychological rebirth into the right to live one's own life. I have a few copies brought with me. I co-founded a website where you will find a host of information. I co-founded this with Judy Mandel, who wrote The Memoir of a Replacement Child, and Rita Battad, who wrote The Replacement Child, an Unconscious Script. For 3 years we've been working on this. And now we are on to our next big challenge, goal, contribution to this movement, a new website as of next year, offering training, offering supervision, offering a lot of resources for professionals aiding, helping replacement children. Thank you so much for being here, for existing, and for being part of what I consider to be the beginning of a great consciousness-raising movement. Thank you.